Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about the Wheel of Fucking Time. And today we are going to continue the Great Hunt. And isn't that fun? Well, turns out, nope, it's not exactly fun. But we'll see. My point is, I'm back. We're going to talk about chapters 9 to 21. That is leave taking all the way up to and including the 9 rings. To enslave them and turn them into wraiths? Probably not, but who knows. Point is, there's some good here, there's a lot of bad here, as always. Let's get to it. Cheers. All right. So, as you remember from yesterday, or maybe not, the horn was stolen. Padan Fane is gone again. It's a huge fuck up and a mess. But it allows us to split the party yet again. The girls go do girl stuff at Magic Girl School. At Girl Magic School? Who knows? Anyway, that's where Nynaeve and Egwene are going, and the boys do Boy Scout adventures with I already forgot his name. Ingtar? Whatever, that dude. The honorable super samurai dude. They are going out and hunting the horn that will then be used to call a zombie army, which apparently is a good thing. Because zombie heroes still be heroes, I guess. Anyway, that's sort of the setup, and we'll follow mostly the boys doing boys things. We'll have a little bit about the girls, but we'll talk mostly about what goes on in girly magic school tomorrow. I've already started reading it, but I figured that makes the most sense to stop there to do the girl stuff tomorrow. I mean, this is a world that is very much on the binarity of gender, so let's adhere to that ridiculous and unrealistic separation of the genders, right? I think that's in the spirit of Bobby J, our gracious host and author. All right, enough of that. So we start out with a bit more of the paranoia and shit, Rand and Perrin and Matt, and obviously our not end and Ogier loyal go on the hunt for the horn, and while they're on their way, on almost going, someone tries to assassinate Rand. Rand, being the brave, sacrificial kind of dude, manages to step back, do shitty stuff with his horse, and the arrow hits the Amelin seed instead, and then kills another guy, who may be a warder or just a guy, who knows. Point is, we also never find out who shot that arrow, but apparently someone is still trying to kill Rand. Not that I can blame them, but, you know, there we are. And then we have the hunting stuff going on, which is, well, we learn about, like, more weird talents that come out of nowhere. One of them is the Sniffer, and a Sniffer is someone who can smell violence and can follow it, so that's pretty lucky, because now we can just, like, run after the Trollocs and Dark Friends and the Horn and the Dagger for Matt. At the same time, Matt and Parent are obviously still peeved that Rand was behaving like a dickhead, so, I don't know. I mean, this is very much about cliches and male stereotypes and also female stereotypes, negative stereotypes. So why the fuck is neither Perrin nor Matt just breaking Rand's nose to solve that, like, problem of communication? I mean, that would be, like, the very, like, manly thing to do, is to just, like, have a punch out and see his best. But instead, they just, like, behave like peeved kids and don't talk to him because he's better than anyone else. So yeah, there's that. Anyway, they just ride on. We get a bit more information about some of the other people riding with them, and other stuff happens. And this is sort of where we comes to the first thing that I find not problematic, but like that I found ridiculous. Robert Jordan introduces our good buddy Uno. Um, he's another one of those border warriors, and he's a grumpy one, so he swears all the time. And Robert fucking Jordan fails at swearing. Don't get me wrong, I love Blood and Ashes, but the way he tries to write the speech patterns of that guy, and he's trying blooming, he doesn't even say blooming, he says like mostly bloody and flaming and whatnot, and goats and whatnot. It does not make, it doesn't sound realistic. I mean, I don't know. It's ridiculous. He doesn't dare to drop like an F-bomb in there for reasons that are maybe called 1991 or whenever that book was written. Maybe other reasons. It just feels unrealistic. It kind of, goes once again into like my overall criticism that Robert Jordan at this point in his career is not a good writer when it comes to actually subtlety or skillfully handling any of the things that he wants to do. The ideas are there. His heart is in the right place, hopefully. His intentions are good, but he sucks at it. The execution is not very good. And that's just like another small bit where we can see this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like picky. Very likely I'm just picky. But there we are. Anyway, that's not like a big deal. It's just like one of those small niggling things. Apart from that, well, they're just riding out and doing their like hunting the Trollocs, and Rand and Matt and Perrin have their like ongoing like tiff. Until second night, Ingtard comes over to, if Ingtard is his name, because I might just like have his name wrong. I don't apologize. Point is, comes over to Rand and is like, oh, by the way, if I die, you're my second in command, not flaming bloody Uno. No, it's you, well-experienced sheep herder Randall Thor. Yeah. And he hands him the dragon banner, because obviously Rand goes into the forest and stares at the dragon banner, because that's what you're supposed to do when you get something as dangerous as that. And Matt and Perrin show up, and they have a bit of a talk, which is not a talk, which is sort of like, yeah. What is it, actually? It is sort of the... Well, now they don't like him anymore, because now they know that that Rand is maybe at least a false dragon and can channel, and thus is dangerous. Which Rand, which Matt, owner of a cursed dagger that will infect everyone around him, sees as a bit of a danger. I guess he's got a point somewhere. Maybe he doesn't, because his dagger is currently stolen by Padan Fane. Anyway, speaking of which, crazy shit happening. Another thing where this is all leading up to something, I promise you. But the point is, we see them following the Trollocs, and there's like 2 villages where they see someone, or maybe don't see someone. But those villages are always empty, and probably everything was taken by the Trollocs. And the Trollocs do sort of random murders for whatever reasons, which is like just kill people, maybe sometimes eat them, running zigzag and killing people. Now, I know that he's trying to do something there, and it's sort of explained later on, but it leads to something. Which is, we're supposed to find their behavior absolutely horrifying and horrific. And yeah, on the surface, objectively, killing people and eating them is wrong. The problem, however, is that whenever, like, from the beginning, which is like 1.5 books ago, we know that Trollocs eat people. Also, murderer are assholes. We know those people are evil. We've seen them in hundreds, like thousands of them show up and do fucked up shit. And now we have like maybe 100 of them? Probably even less, like 20, 30. I have no idea how many Trollocs there are. And yeah, it doesn't track. It doesn't feel really evil. The other thing is, and this is more of like a general observation, is like probably a sign of the times kind of thing. We come to that scene when they cross the river and they find those two maybe dark friend guards, those two guards of Pat and Fane's place, and they're skinned alive and hung up in a tree. And everyone, even like, old like guards, is feeling shitty about it. Some of them, like everyone, is like retching, and I'm like, yeah, but it's not that bad. Which, as I said, is probably more like an idea of like how far adult fantasy has come since then, because having two people skinned alive, dead, hung up in a tree doesn't really faze me as a reader anymore. It doesn't come across as like a huge atrocity. It's like I've read Blood Meridian. I've read about like much worse stuff. I've read the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I've read, you know, two evil guys being hung up in a tree doesn't sound like much anymore. And this is like the other thing. We're talking about people that have been fighting those Trollocs, which are basically orcs, for all of their fucking lives, right? And they are faced by two people hung up in a tree. It's like, as I said, like the thing that I mentioned before, is like, with raising the stakes so fast early on in Eye of the World, it just doesn't really come across. And having like our main characters already face these people, these horrors over time, right? It doesn't really. At this point, the stakes seem like laughingly low. It's like, yeah, it's shitty, it's horrible. I get it, but there's two people that like insulted you once, and now you have to like throw up because you see them skinned alive after hearing all this other stuff, and like, I don't know. As I said, it just doesn't really track. Now, having that idea that something worse is going on when they find a murderer nailed to the barn door, well, house door, whatever, yeah, okay. Now that is an idea, because this time he actually does something right. Robert Jordan does something right, and I'm not above calling it out. It's really good. The idea is we see what is currently sort of like the second worst thing out there, with the worst thing out there obviously being like Forsaken and Balsamon, but like down, below that there's like Murderol, which are sort of like Nazgul, only more so, or whatever. Having one of them nailed to a door, and we don't even know what it is, and no one knows what it is. Yeah, that is a good way to raise the stakes, because you don't tell us immediately what is going on. You're not like, oh, by the way, this, like, you don't have another like Aes Sedai or Water jump out of a bush like, oh, by the way, this was a Murderol nailer. We know of those. They are even worse. He doesn't do that this time around. What he does is like, yeah, no one knows. Now we're kind of scared, because that's, yeah, that's brutal. That's brutal and fucked up. And should not happen. He's drawing down the fear of the unknown. So good on Bobby J for doing that. I'm happy with him for that. That is, as I said, one of the good things in this book that I appreciate. So yeah, we have that bit. We then have a bit of a switch to the group, so we find out it's Padan Fane who has also brought something out of Shadar Logoth, and now he has the dagger. Is he possessed by Mordeth? If so, what is Mordeth? We don't know exactly, but apparently Padan Fane, conspirator, hook-nosed, like huge beak-nosed conspirator and dark friend for 40 years, is now even more dangerous. And apparently he's trying to bring the Horn of Valir to Shadar Logoth. Possibly. We will find out in the nearest future. I mean, we don't, but never mind. So far, so good. We have, as I said, we find out about this stuff. Matt and Perrin and Rand have something of a, like, not actual, like, talking, dealing with their conflicts. It's more like they figure out why Rand was behaving like a dickhead, but the result is they're like, well, we don't trust you. Now we're not pissed off at you, now we just don't trust you anymore. So yeah, there's that. what else happens after that? And like, so we have that weird move, which I still kind of find interesting, which is they fall asleep and they wake up in a parallel dimension. Now, first of all, I do like that thing. I mean, I've been told, and y'all have been telling me that with The Great Hunt, Robert Jordan moves away from Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and whatnot, and he does so. And we're going to examine how he does so and and so forth in a bit. So having the idea of parallel dimensions, parallel worlds that are different possibilities or differently possible or likely worlds, I like that. That's a cool idea. That's a cool addition to the world. That's really cool. We also get a hint of like how the three are transported there through that whole long-ass prophecy and Lanfear, because we get a dream of Egwene when Egwene sees a woman standing over Rand. And as the luck will have it, they even run into a woman that calls herself Celine. Doesn't say, yeah, well, you know, that kind of thing happens, I guess. Anyway, so very good. The idea of having these parallel dimensions adds a bit of an idea, like a facet to the world that is at least somewhat unique or less, you know, somewhat unique. I'm fine with that. Also, the whole idea of them coming to that like statue of Arthur Hawkwind and finding it actually a statue of the Trollocs' victory over Arthur Hawkwind and not the other way around. That was handled well, I would say. I'm good with that. So yeah, good on Robert Jordan for actually doing something right for once. But now we come to well, the whole how to say, yes, the Celine issue, which brings us to another thing, I guess. The Celine issue. So they find a woman, highly non-suspicious. She knows everything, and she comes on really hard on Rand. Right? She's like, and Rand falls for her almost immediately, and everyone else also. It's absolutely not suspicious at all. Once again, Robert Jordan is very much using the very, very heavy like hand to make us understand that this woman is scary and not to be trusted at all. Is she Lanfear? I guess, but I don't know. I just guess at this point. I would be very, very surprised if she is not, however, because that would show a lot of subtlety on Robert Jordan's part, which I doubt he has. However, something occurred to me there, and in other parts as well, but it was sort of one of those scenes when she's basically stripping in front of Rand, but only basically and so forth. And this is how prudish the whole thing is. Now, don't get me wrong. When we talk about sexuality, and this is obviously a series of books that deals with gender roles and sexuality, or tries to. And it was written in like the late 80s, early 90s and so forth, so I agree with that as well. But, you know, Game of Thrones, the first novel by George R. R. Martin, not first novel, but the first Song of Ice and Fire novel, was published in 1994, I think. So we're not that far away from it. But here we have a book, and we've started seeing that already. And what I talked about yesterday with like Rand and Nynaeve, and everyone is like is always blushing about the mere mention of naked bodies. We never get ever shown one in this, never ever describe one. All we get is women crossing their arms under their breasts, and that's about it. Not even like any of the boys ever scratching their balls, which, you know. Anyway, point is, this reads very much like YA, like young adult, if not a child's story. It has this weird combination. And this is something that I find, like, I don't know, it's super weird to understand. It feels super weird for me, because on the one hand, we have extremely mature themes in there, like the idea of the gentling or stilling, which is basically forced sterilization, and that is absolutely abhorrent. So we have these themes in there, but then we write about, like, sexuality, as if we were naughty 13-year-old boys that have never seen a female body. Well, nowadays probably we have seen female bodies at the age of 9 on our smartphones, but that's a different thing. Not in 1990. And everyone in this book is behaving like that. So while it is like, and I always thought of Wheel of Time as sort of like adult fantasy, as this, link between Tolkien and Game of Thrones, so to speak, or modern Grimdark or whatever. And it does, at least show us some form of atrocity, even though it is a bit, weird about it. It doesn't hold back when it comes to violence, really hold back. I mean, we still get we get like people being eaten and people being skinned alive and hung up into trees. But the gods forfend that we ever even hear the mention of a naked female body. That's not gonna happen in this book, at least not so far. And I just found that very odd, and I feel that that's sort of one of the things that makes me not uncomfortable, but at least, well, it also makes me uncomfortable, but not so much. But it's like kind of makes it so difficult for me to actually get a handle of this book. Is like, does it want to be like a kid's book, or does it want to be like a book for adults? Because it doesn't track either way. It deals with subject matter that I feel is probably not something you want to introduce to your 14, 15-year-old kids. But on the other hand, if it's like marketed to, or like if it's written for adult people, then I don't know. So one of those things that I found interesting here that I wanted to point out, like as a sort of revelation of why this feels so weird to me, is like that we have this odd, I don't know, discord, I guess, between dissonance, between cognitive dissonance between like the more like innocent, dare I say, well, not really innocent, but like sort of pseudo-innocent, prudish elements on the one hand and the violence on the other hand, that I find weird, because I still don't know what the target audience is. Am I the target audience, or is my 13-year-old self the target audience? Either way, it doesn't convince me. Or it's not exactly for me, but the question is like, which one is it supposed to be for, if you see what I mean. So that's something that I found very interesting, especially about, like, that idea like of Rand and Celine, which is totally not Lanfear, and other aspects of that nature as well. It's like this, and also the other side is like, yeah, Rand and Egwene have been promised. It's like, basically people marry, children come from somewhere, and before that they maybe kiss, just maybe kiss once, but that's how it is. We don't ever talk about the fucking in this book, at least not so far. Who knows? Probably, possibly, fucking happened somewhere in the past, but not right now. All right, anyway, Rand is falling over himself to let himself be manipulated by Celine, and they finally exit that parallel world, and we learn that because it's a parallel world, time moves differently, so they are ahead of Pat and Fane and gang, and they just like waylay them to take the horn and the dagger, and then move with that to, I have already forgotten the name of the city. Never mind. It's not important because we never actually learn anything about like the actual lay of the land. Yes, we have a map in the book. Funnily enough, there's a 2-second track called Map in the audiobook, which is just like 2 seconds of nothing. But the point is, I was told that this book is like the Wheel of Time, the world is so detailed, and we have all these wonderfully well-crafted cultures and stuff, and so far I have not seen a lot about it. I have not seen a lot of like culture or anything. Yes, Faldara and Chinara is basically sort of pseudo-Japan, pseudo-China, but more like pseudo-Japan, honor, whatever kind of thing in the north. That's it. And the rest is, I guess, wishy-washy medieval Europe, sort of. And that's it. So, yeah, I don't know. We're going to that other city. and they're fleeing basically, and what's her name, Celine, is always trying to get Rand to touch the horn and do horny things with the horn, and we already know that the one who's seeking for glory cannot use the horn. The horn is for someone who's not seeking for glory. So Rand, like, I'll bring it to Ilion so they can do it with the horn whatever the fuck they want. I don't want the horn. Is mightily annoying Celine, who is always like, I will stand at your side if you have the horn. Think of the glory, think of the glory. And Rand is like, ooh, glory, boobs that I'm not supposed to mention. Also, I guess I'll just drop it off somewhere. And that's annoying her. And then we come to the Game of Thrones, which is called the Game of Houses here, when they come to that, like, inn, when possibly further dark friends show up, I guess. I'm pretty sure. So here's the thing, like, I'm pretty sure that the guy, though, that one man they meet in the Inn of the Nine Rings, is, you know, one of those dark friends, because it just, it feels like that. And if I would, like, care enough and go back to the terrible prologue, I could probably discover him as one of those that the man who calls himself Bors is recognizing because of his uniform, his boots, his whatever. I'm almost certain. Not 100%, but almost. Anyway, and at that point, Lanfear, who is not Lanfear but Celine, leaves in the middle of the night, and Rand and the Ogier, like, move further on to wherever with the box that is possibly still containing the horn, unless she managed to steal it in the middle of the night through her magical skills. Who knows? Anyway, that's sort of like that rough plot. And once again, this bit, like, it kind of feels okay. We're definitely departing from the, like, Lord of the Rings plot points here, and I'm fine with that. That's really cool. My main issues right now are definitely that, like, weird cognitive dissonance of, like, the adult themes with those terribly prudish idea of sexuality, or, like, leaving it out. Because the interesting thing is, I guess, and I'm coming back to this because it really bugs me, is like, Lord of the Rings does not deal with sexuality. People marry, and there might even be children, sometimes, if they're halflings, I guess. But that's it. Robert Jordan is desperately trying to put in some sort of erotic, romantic, sexual, or whatever tension there. But he just is too prude, I guess, too prudish to actually do it. So it's like, yeah, Celine is like, I'm gonna change. Can you give me one of your shirts? Also, can you help me unbutton? And then he just, like, turns around, blushes, and when he turns around back, she's wearing another dress. It's like, fuck's sake, just say Rand sees titties, and now we're good with it. I mean, I don't know. It just feels awkward? Cringy and awkward is, I guess, what I'm saying here. There's one more thing that I want to look at before we're done for tonight, and one funny thing at the side. We have a quick, like, with the riverboat captain, the corny pirate, whose name I've already forgotten again. It's maybe Doman or something like that. That dude. So he gets paid because to go somewhere and be killed there. And that plotline is sort of like, okay, we have that guy again, so I assume he will become more important later on, but right now he's just fleeing because he finds out. And he has one of the other seals of the Dark One, Heartstone, shaped like yin and yang. And now he's going somewhere on the open seas. That whole bit, like, I like that. That sounded, that plot line in itself is fine and is good, and I'm okay with that. However, why does the guy even think in corny pirate speech? I mean, so we have, like, his perspective, and it's his inner monologue. He even talks to himself in cheesy pirate speech. Like, the fuck, I guess. So yeah, I'm not overly happy with that bit either. But it is what it is, I guess, and we'll have to live with the fact that Robert Jordan thought it appropriate to come up with cheesy accents and then write them out in the most brutal way. Is that necessary? I don't think so, but it is what it is. All right, now let's look at one more thing that is like two more things maybe. I'm coming up with stuff that I wanted to mention. One of them is the sort of post-apocalyptic feel to it, which I know is intentional, right? And I know it's all about like this is it's the wheel of time. Things happen again and again and again. So yeah, there's like remnants of older cultures and shit there. And I mean that whole idea when they're digging up that huge statue is really cool. However, when we have that idea that human civilization is crawling back and it's like countries are becoming more and more waste and there's places that don't belong to anyone. That's not how that works. Because either you need to explain why there's more, like less and less humans, which you need to come up with an idea of like why humans are not multiplying, while time is still moving on. And there is not openly, at least, any form of like big thing. Like there's no global pandemic or anything in these lands, right? But like apparently humanity is on the retreat and countries just fail and the land ends up nowhere. And yeah, I know that we have that theme in Middle Earth, right? The whole like part of like Fellowship of the Ring, when they wander from the Shire to Elrond's place in Rivendell, you have all those like former Northern, like all the stuff that is used to be the kingdom of Anor is basically ruins and no one claims it. So we have that idea there, but it doesn't even make sense in Lord of the Rings. It just like works there because Tolkien is writing a mythology or a legend. He's not trying to make realistic stories. But here, Robert Jordan is aiming for some form of realism. I'm coming to that in a second, which is sort of where I wanted to go with this. So it's maybe like 1.5 points and not 2 points that I wanted to make. So yeah, but he tries to explain this like you have all these different countries and they fight for all these different places, and then they just like collapse into nothing, and then no one cares, and people move away, and suddenly it's just the wild. And if you're aiming for realism, you can't do that because realism. This is not. So let's have a look at realism, because this sort of, I can see where we are coming to one of the points where maybe the Wheel of Time can be seen as a bridge or a transformation in fantasy between what is essentially what J.R.R. Tolkien is writing and for example, what then people like George R. R. Martin are writing. And I'm not going to say that either one is better, because I do have my issues with George R. R. Martin, but this is not yet me trying to reread Game of Thrones and the follow-ups and getting mad at George Martin. So we'll leave that for that exercise for the far future, unless Winds of Winter ever comes out. Should Winds of Winter come out, I promise I will do a full-on Song of Ice and Fire reread, because I need to reread that shit to actually figure out what was going on. However, my actual point, realism and stuff. When we look at the Tolkien-esque epic fantasy of the 1950s and stuff that comes after that, what we find is basically something modeled after other stuff, mythology, epic poetries, and Nordic sagas. What that means is, like, our characters exemplify specific traits or moralities, characteristics, and so forth. They are ideals. They're not realistic characters. Also, we only have those, like when you read mythology or when you read The Lord of the Rings, basically all the people we meet, all the characters we meet are important. Presumably all of Gondor, and like in Elrond's house there's hundreds of people working there. Presumably there's even more people working in Gondor, and yes, we get like some mention of like some of them were sent away and whatnot, but presumably, I mean, there's an army marching somewhere around in Gondor and whatnot. There's hundreds of thousands of people, but we never hear about them because they're not important for this form of exemplary tale that Tolkien is trying to tell us. However, when we come to stuff like, say, Game of Thrones and contemporary fantasy, we have moved away from this. The actual realistic human being, the everyday person, the common man, common human, is very much a part of contemporary fantasy. We have taken it down there. And obviously you have something like Glenn Cook's The Black Company, which does that explicitly in a lot of ways, and you have others that deal with that kind of stuff as well. But you can see that sort of not starting, but like becoming popular with something like Game of Thrones and more contemporary fantasy. Suddenly, stable hands and whatnot are more realistic characters that are there, like that feel like they actually have an existence and a character, and are not just there to say yes, my lord, and then drop off the book again. So that's good. So that's sort of where the contemporary fantasy is. And Robert Jordan has that idea. He just is not really good at it because he's still stuck between those two, right? You look at the beginning in Eye of the World when they go through the village, and everyone in that village that is mentioned is sort of still an example for something. They're still not just realistic characters. They're still there's the grumpy old guy. What's his name? Senbui, the Thatcher and the arsehole. There's the brave blacksmith. There's the lazy villager. They're all still very much cutout characters that are there because Robert Jordan. You have that there have to be more people around there for it to feel realistic. But he doesn't know how to do that, or he doesn't, trust himself to do it realistically. So he's kind of stuck in the middle between having just these ideal exemplary characters there. Those, I don't know the word for that. Those exemplary characters. He has to fill the place with all these other people. There's hundreds of servants, there's hundreds of everywhere, but they still don't matter. Or if they get to do something, he tries to treat them like his main characters, which doesn't work because his main characters, he ideally has a lot of time to figure out how to give them character depth. He doesn't do that there, so they have these cheesy cutouts. You have the Sniffer, who is he feels like a cheesy caricature of a character. And that's something that we see in a lot of aspects of this world in Wheel of Time. It's he has the idea that he has to sort of do world building and explain how politics work, because there is supposed to be politics in this world. There's no politics in Lord of the Rings because they're not really important. Gondor doesn't have a foreign policy. It has allies that are sworn to it, and they do actually hold to their vows because they're honorable or they're traitors, and that's it. There's no idea of pushing actual power extorted and whatnot. That's not how Lord of the Rings world works. Here we get the idea that yes, there is some sort of political power. There's diplomacy and stuff going on, but it never gets explained because Robert Jordan doesn't know how. He has the right idea once again, which is we need to have a multifaceted world. It's complicated. If I want to tell a story that feels realistic, I need to make it realistic. I need to make the world realistic in some ways. And then he just fails at doing so. Which once again, I don't know, makes it feel crude and half thought through. And I guess over time, with the coming stories and the coming novels, the coming volumes of this series. I mean, we're still 2 books in, 1.5, I guess, in. So maybe more stuff will come in the future, but for now, it just all feels half thought out. It's I need to do this, and there needs to be politics. And I'll explain later when I actually figure out what politics is. That's sort of how it feels to me at this point. So, to sum this up for today, Parallel Worlds, really cool. I like that. The rest, not so much. It just, we see some of the flaws, which is the stakes were raised too quickly, so now we have them following a bunch of Trollocs, and it was who the fuck cares? They're just 50 Trollocs. You went through more in in the first half of the first novel. That's one thing. Then we have that weird dissonance or whatever, however I should call it, incongruity between, on the one hand, mature violence or sort of mature violence and a weirdly prudish depiction of sexuality, which nevertheless seems to be important for the book, and he just doesn't know how to actually portray it. Plus, well, that last bit, which is the world feels stuck between very black and white, simplistic depictions in a more Tolkien-esque style, and a more realistic world building, or like with like actual political, diplomatic interactions with countries and cultures, which is not yet there. I don't know. Let's find out what goes on in Magic Girl School tomorrow. And until then, cheers.